Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. NBC News weighed in with some very strong words about the heat wave in the Pacific Northwest. They said, the Pacific Northwest is one of the most intense heat waves ever, with the worst still to come. And yes, climate change made it worse. The extreme northward buckle in the jet stream was caused by a blocking pattern, and climate change is causing these types of extreme blocking patterns to occur more often and last longer. Climate change is also leading to warming temperatures overall, which makes the baseline temperatures for heat waves higher than they otherwise would have been decades ago. These are very authoritative sounding statements, and NBC News wouldn't have said them if they weren't true. So let's take a look at the actual data. It was extremely hot in Washington and Oregon yesterday, but temperatures across most of the United States were below normal, and New Mexico is having their coolest end of June weather on record. For some reason, NBC News didn't mention the record cool air in much of the country. Let's compare the current heat wave map with some heat waves from the past. On this date in 1934, there were 90 and 100 degree temperatures from coast to coast. Similar pattern on July 14, 1936, except that the heat was even more intense. 29 cities in the Midwest set their all-time high temperature record that day. I don't have the data for the current heat wave yet, but odds are July 14, 1936 was about 10 degrees warmer. July 4th, 1911 was a similar heat wave and was the hottest July 4th on record by a wide margin. On July 4th, 1911, Boston reached their all-time record temperature of 106 degrees. And the Boston Globe reported temperatures of 112 degrees in Maine and 110 degrees in New Hampshire. Across the United States, the vast majority of record high temperatures occurred before 1960, and about 90% occurred when carbon dioxide levels were below 350 parts per million. The percent of stations in the United States reaching 100 degrees Fahrenheit sometime during the year has dropped in half over the past 90 years. As carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased, the percent of stations reaching 100 degrees Fahrenheit sometime during the year has decreased sharply. The average daily maximum temperature in the United States has also dropped sharply over the past century. The percent of days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit in the United States has dropped sharply over the last century. Same story with the percent of days above 95 degrees. And the same story with the percent of days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. None of the claims being made in the NBC News article has any basis in science, but they did say them very authoritatively. The global temperature anomaly today was 0.2 degrees Celsius with respect to a 1979 to 2000 baseline. NBC News wants people to believe that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is trapping heat, but for some reason it's not doing a very good job in New Mexico, in Paraguay, or in Antarctica. Carbon dioxide seems to be very selective in where it decides to trap heat. NBC News told us that Washington and Oregon were indicative of the global climate, and they chose to ignore the cool weather in New Mexico. But had the roles been reversed, had it been hot in New Mexico, then NBC News would have told us that New Mexico was indicative of the global climate. They are classic ambulance-chasing snake oil salesmen, selling an imaginary cure to an imaginary problem. The press and politicians love to make very bold and authoritative-sounding claims. In 1995, the New York Times told us that most of the beaches on the east coast of the United States would be gone in 25 years. That would have been last year. I'm pretty sure that didn't happen, and I'm also pretty sure that the New York Times never retracted their fake claim. When Al Gore received his Nobel Prize in 2007, he gave a very somber speech predicting the demise of Arctic ice.
Another new study to be presented by U.S. Navy researchers later this week warns it could happen in as little as 7 years. 7 years from now. In the last few months, it has been harder and harder to misinterpret the signs that our world is spinning out of kilter.
This is a graph of Arctic sea ice extent every day since the start of 2007, when Al Gore won his Nobel Prize. Al Gore predicted the Arctic would be ice-free by the year 2014, but the reality is that there's been no long-term change over the past 15 years. The ice freezes in the winter and it melts in the summer. But there isn't any trend since Al Gore made his forecast of the demise of the ice. Like Al Gore, the New York Times had no clue what they were talking about, but they made their claim very authoritatively. And what NBC News said was complete nonsense, but they made it sound like they knew what they were talking about. They're selling the idea that man's carbon sins are going to lead to fire, brimstone, and a great flood. These are religious ideas which many people grew up with. They're very familiar, and it's very easy for the false prophets at NBC News to tap into these deep-seated fears, beliefs, and emotions. These climate scamsters have established a religion based on many of the principles which people grew up with. These religious ideas are very familiar, and it's easy for propagandists to tap into them. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on this scam for the past 13 years. You can visit him, Kyrie, and Caesar on the web at realclimatescience.com.